Hello, BookTube, and welcome to your Daily Penguin. This is our tour through my Penguin Classic wall, book by book and author by author. I would ordinarily have my little Schnauzer Frieder up here with me, but she's sound asleep directly behind me on the bed and didn't want to be disturbed. But yesterday, we did one book. We did the prose and poetry of Percy Bysshe Shelley. That was fun. But it had me worrying, as single books always do, it had me worrying that we're never going to get through this Penguin Classic crawl, this March of the Penguins, because we have lots to go. All of those shelves you see over my shoulder are double stacked, and the year is well over half done. So when I get talking for 30 minutes or whatever about one particular author, I start to despair that we're not going to reach the finish line in 2020. There's no reason why we have to. We could do this forever if we wanted to. But today we get a lot closer to our goal because today is all of these books. Today we're doing Henry James, and I have an absolutely ridiculous amount of Henry James, literally a whole shelf of Henry James. And this is an author that is widely regarded as one of the greatest American writers of all time, and there have been moments and there are glimpses and there are parts of novels where I can almost see that, or I can almost agree with that, but that isn't reflected here. Obviously, what is reflected here is not my acknowledgement that this is a great author, but rather this is what a shelf looks like if I am grappling with an author. If I'm not certain about an author, then this is what you will see. In most cases, I'm sure that there is, for instance, a ton more. Name it. You name an author. James Fenimore Cooper. I'm sure that Penguin Classics makes a whole lot more James Fenimore Cooper than I actually own. But when I'm grappling with an author, then every time I see a Penguin Classic of that author, I think, well, now might be the chance. Maybe now is finally the way that you will figure out whether or not what you think of this author and maybe get on the same wavelength as everybody else. At least that's true in the case of Henry James. I have been grappling with this author for the whole of my life, wondering what it is that people see in him that I don't see. And it's not like I'm completely blind to some of what people see. Sometimes that is true. Like, for instance, Proust. It is just a complete different wavelength. I don't have any idea what people see in Proust. None whatsoever. None at all. And that's not just a French thing, although it is still true for Zola and also a bit with Balzac and Flaubert. The plebeian French authors like Dumas I love, but even there are scenes, there are books that work, but Proust, it's just, I don't see it at all. It's a completely different wavelength, and that is not true with Henry James. There are things that Henry James does that I recognize. I see what they are. I see why they would garner attention, why they would garner affection, even. I just don't see enough of them to warrant this guy's reputation. I don't, and as a result, I compulsively buy him when I see him in Penguin Classic, always hoping that the next Penguin Classic will be the one that turns the key in the lock and gives me Henry James. And as a result, I have a ton of Henry James to show you. We have the American Scene in a Penguin Classic. We have Washington Square, a comparatively thin and controlled novel, something I very much liked. Then another copy of Washington Square. So we have the older Penguin that has the block white letters with the colored coded banner on top, and then we have the newer Penguin with the black spine and the script writing. So I have two of those. I absolutely do not need two copies of Washington Square, especially since I have a Project Gutenberg copy of Washington Square as well on my iPad. Then we have Wings of the Dove with a John Singer Sargent watercolor there from Venice. This is my Penguin Henry James is bounced back and forth between the old version, like here's the Tragic Muse, that have these banners on the top and the block white writing, and the new versions that have the white script on a black spine. This is the Tragic Muse. Then we have the Golden Bowl, pretty much pretty much inexcusable Henry James novel that I nevertheless have, and probably more than one copy. Then we go back to the older copy. This is the American, with this older version. And then the Sacred Fount, a lesser known Henry James, if ever there were one. I notice this is not even all my Henry James, because the Princess Casamassima, which we've already talked about, isn't here. It wasn't with these, and if it wasn't with these, then who knows what else wasn't with these either. I noticed some Henry James that isn't here. The Ambassadors, there we have the Ambassadors, with the little bit awkward. The same painting was used for an Oxford World Classics paperback of Trollope, but that's okay. There are only so many paintings in the, where was this? The Tate in London. So this is the Ambassadors. Then we have Portrait of a Lady, which is huge. And this some of these may be relatively new. Some of these may have been hauled on this channel. Publisher forever reprinting Henry James. And then we have a battered copy of What Maisie Knew, another John Singer Sargent painting. This one in detail. This is a haunting little detail from a very good John Singer Sargent painting. A painting that they don't show me the whole painting on the back here, but I've often said that a really good John Singer Sargent painting, portrait, whatever, will be better than most of the 19th century novels that took place in the same year, and this is one of them. This is one of his most enigmatic and arresting paintings. But What Maisie Knew is also a book, and I this is a battered old trade paperback that I've tried What Maisie Knew many times. And then we'll finish up here with the really the pinnacle of the redundancy here, because we have, like, for instance, this is a newer collection, the Aspen Papers and Other Tales. The Aspen Papers is predictably one of my favorite short Henry James pieces, because of it's saturated in the atmosphere of Venice, and it's also extremely literary, and James was really good at both of those. This is the Aspen Papers and Other Stories. Then we have Daisy Miller and Other Tales. And then we have just Daisy Miller in a thin little thing. No reason at all why I need two of those. Then we have The Turn of the Screw and the Aspen Papers. So I had the Aspen Papers. I think it's also included in Daisy Miller and Other Tales, and now here it's headlining its own volume, and I have two copies of The Turn of the Screw and the Aspen Papers, and then we finish up with The Turn of the Screw and Other Ghost Stories. Ridiculous. It's not ridiculous on the part of Penguin to make all of these, because they've got a business to run, and teachers, Penguin Classics are often aimed at schools. Teachers will want to teach one particular thing, maybe not others. They'll get a deal on the new Penguin edition that has that particular thing in it, so Penguin is constantly repackaging and shuffling around all their stuff, but that doesn't apply to me. That doesn't mean I need all of this Henry James. Is just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous for an author that I don't love. But that, as I mentioned, is part of this Daily Penguin, is taking control of my Daily Penguin. This is a whole shelf. We're gonna do a Steve pile of a whole shelf of this particular author, fiction and nonfiction. You've noticed. When I'm not 100% sure, I know it's gonna be Philistine of me, especially when talking about Penguin Classics. I'm not 100% sure that, given my druthers, if I were suddenly seized with the impulse to read a Henry James, I'm not 100% sure that I wouldn't immediately just pick up my iPad. I'm not 100% sure that I would come back to any of these books. Certainly when I prowl the Penguin Classic wall with Frida on my elbow, I almost never touch a Henry James. I'll go to the left and to the right of him, but not these. So this is exactly the kind of soul-searching, bibliographical soul-searching that I'm finding I'm doing a lot of with the Daily Penguin. So I really appreciate you coming along for the ride. But anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up for now. That is your Penguin for today. It is Henry James, and when it comes to a recommend, God help us. What are you supposed to say? Well, if you want to be literary minded for American literature, you can't ignore Henry James. You have to read him, and because he was so prolific, you have to read a lot of him. I need to find the Princess Casamassima and put it with the rest of these, whichever of these I keep. But if you want to be literary minded, but you don't want to sink in 2 years to reading The Golden Bowl, then I would advise you to read The Turn of the Screw, read Daisy Miller, read the Aspen Papers, read short Henry James, and see what you think. Maybe you'll like him. Even if you do like him, you're still going to watch out for there's a tectonic plate that runs through his writing career, and it changes a lot about the reading experience of Henry James. I've had people come across it unawares and be badly surprised that when he was a normal writer, writing his texts, revising them, the pen, the writing table, the distractions, all that sort of stuff, he wrote one kind of book, and then he shifted to dictating his novels, and the novels changed, drastically changed. You want to beware of that as well and figure out which of those Henry James you prefer. I've known readers who love the later Henry James, just love the weird, baroque, endless pettifogging of his prose in those novels. So it'll be up to you to decide. Of course, I can't. It's going to be a recommend. It's just going to depend on which fraction of Henry James you want. But anyway, I'm going to have to figure out what to do with these things. I will stack them on the floor for now and see what happens when we move on tomorrow. I'm hoping that tomorrow we'll have a smaller batch of books to deal with, because wrestling with books is tiring. But we shall see. I'm deliberately not looking, so we'll find out together. So I'll reconvene tomorrow, and I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.